Hey guys, it's Rudy coming at you live from Palm Beach in Florida. It is Wednesday today. It is September the 27th, and I'm going to do something a little bit different today. And the fact that you are watching this video right now means that it has not been taken down yet. Whenever you go out on a limb and share something that goes against the prevailing narrative and the preferred propaganda, then you have the risk of either being demonetized or being deplatformed or otherwise just being, canceled. I don't think I'd probably be at risk of being canceled for this. I might be demonetized, which is okay. And at the same time, they might restrict this video or otherwise delete it. What I want to do is talk about climate change. And at the risk of calling it a hoax and a financial scam, because I'm not allowed to do that because that would be inappropriate, and because I completely lack a sense of humor, I'm just going to use sarcasm as my defense mechanism. And because I'm unable to be funny, I will just make snarky comments and leave it to you to decide whether I'm being honest or upfront or not. But what I want to do is share facts with you. And very specifically, I want to get down into the weeds on just stop oil. And that's actually where I started off. But then, you know what happens is when you go down one rabbit hole, you find another, and you find another, and you find another. Well, that's just me anyway. And then you just can't stop. So let me just get right into this and start off with one of my heroes. So this is one of the people I like the most. It's probably one of the best politicians in the world, John Kerry. He owns a couple of private jets, and he's very, very concerned about the fact that we are destroying the climate. Ironically, not him, but we are. And he's also one of the people who constantly makes very good speeches why it is that we should stop traveling, for instance, not flying commercial while he flies private, and why we should, for instance, start eating bugs while he's probably eating steak. But that's just because of his sense of humor. So I'm starting off with one of my heroes here because recently in a congressional hearing, one of the Republican members of Congress described him as a climate change grifter. That's not really fair because grifters do things on a small scale, and Kerry is a big thinker. He does everything on a large scale. So now with that out the way, let's take a look at some of the companies that are very engaged in climate activism. And then we can see why it is that they are so efficient and effective at doing what they're doing, because they are really, really good and very professional at plying their trade. So the first one I want to discuss here, by the way, the one I really want to get to, which absolutely shocked me. I was stunned, and at this age, it takes a lot to shock me. But that's just stop oil. So I'm going to keep that one to last because that's my best one. Here I'm looking at 350, right? So 350 fights for a world beyond fossil fuels. What a worthy and just cause, right? So everything that they do is good for us. We believe in a safe climate and a better future and a prosperous and equitable world built with the power of ordinary people, driven by renewable energy and rooted in justice. There's not much that you can find wrong in that statement. It's all wonderful. The only thing that I have a question about is who is actually funding you, because 350 has a lot of cash. And then you could say, what do they do with it? And that's really what I want to get into. Now, just as a little preamble here, what I want to share with you is this. In the same way, for us as energy investors, we look at publicly traded companies who report quarterly. And of course, it's like I said in a previous video, it's like opening the kimono and showing your weaknesses, right? You have to provide all your financials and all your disclosures to this Securities and Exchange Commission, or if you're in another country, a similar body. And then any investor can kind of page through it, read your 8K filings, 10K filings, or the equivalent in another country. Now, the thing with nonprofits is that it works almost exactly the same way. A nonprofit organization, whether it's a public charity or a private foundation, files a thing in the United States, which is called a 501c3 990 filing. So that 990 filing is a public document, and pretty much everyone has access to it, with the exception of not necessarily having access to all the information. So let's take a look here at 350, and then we see what it is that they do first. So they do not disclose their donors. Now, this is a very important point because actually they do disclose their donors. What they have the ability to do is just not show you who the donors are. So when people make a donation to a charity, they can request anonymity. And there are a few ways in which they can do that. They can provide the funds to the nonprofit through an intermediary. In other words, through a community foundation or the United Way or something like that. In other words, I give the money to the United Way and the United Way gives it to the charity. And then I can request anonymity with the United Way, and the United Way will say, in my example, to the charity, here is an anonymous gift. Another way to do it is to give them cash. There are a couple of ways to do that. Another way to do it, which is a little bit more sort of obscure for the average person to track and follow, is that the IRS allows you to publish a 990 without showing your donors, which is the same 990 that you filed to the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, but you have a sort of secondary version of that where you can actually provide anonymity to the donors if that is what they have requested. So it is possible for them to not disclose who their donors are. And in the case of 350, they do not disclose their donors. However, we know from before that 350 has received funding from the Tides Foundation, which is a San Francisco-based DAF. A DAF is a donor-advised fund that has funneled hundreds of millions of dollars to liberal groups from donors and foundations wishing to remain anonymous. So they use an intermediary like the Tides Foundation, and then effectively the organization, the public charity 350, is receiving funding from the Tides Foundation, but you don't know who gave it to the Tides Foundation. There are also rumors, and I'm not sure about the factual content here, but there are rumors linked to George Soros and Tom Steyer, who have contributed extensively. And another major donor, and this one is public information, is the Foundation for the Carolinas, or FFTC, which is also a DAF, a donor-advised fund, in other words, also acting as an intermediary. We know that they donated $6 million, approximately $3 million in 2 years, 2016 and 17, and that represented approximately 20% of the revenue of 350 for those 2 years. Major FFTC account holder and large donor to numerous environmental organizations is North Carolina billionaire Fred Stanback. And this is a quote: "A known proponent of anti-humanist environmentalism and the belief that protecting the environment hinges on population control," or whatever you want to call it. That was reported in April 2018 in the Knoxville News. Now, those are facts. So let's go a little bit deeper into the facts here. And then I'm going to go a little faster, and then I'm going to slow down again when I get to just stop oil, because it's absolutely shocking. In the case of 350, they have a few executives, about 6, maybe 7 of them, who earn 6-figure incomes. The highest paid executive is Jillian Bove. I'm sure that's how you say her name, but I'm not absolutely convinced. She's the executive director. She works 40 hours per week, and she earns approximately $140,000 in cash and another $18,000 in other compensation, which could be bonuses or other stipends that she receives. So in the first place, they have a number of employees, as I said, about 7 or so, who earn salaries of around $150,000. So that's $1 million per year on average. But that's the executive team, not all the employees. I'll get more into it in just a minute. How much money does 350 actually generate? Well, according to their last 990 filing, and this is not current because it's not 2022, it's the year before, they had received $23 million in anonymous donations. And the year before that, they had received $25 million in anonymous donations. Their expenses were approximately $19 million and some. And then right at the bottom, you can see they have net assets or fund balances as of the last current year of their filing. They had $12.7 million of assets under management. So they have no problem with cash, and they can fund all kinds of protests and marches and activities right across the world. Not to the same scale as Just Stop Oil, but certainly quite big when you have a cash haul of around 20 or more than $20 million per year coming in. How about grants that they made? So, well, how much money of that sort of pool of $23 million of anonymous donations did they actually give out and grant to other smaller charities and other organizations? So these are grants to domestic organizations, and these ones are to domestic individuals and then foreign organizations and so on. and it's around $250,000, right? So they received $23 million, but they only dished out and redistributed about $500,000. So a very small amount of their cash haul that they received actually went to other domestic organizations and other nonprofit type organizations. But here's the big line on the expense report: other salaries and wages, $10 million total expenses. Program expenses, $8.3 million. So if 10 million, 10.4 million is total expenses, and of that 8.3 million in salaries and wages are for program expenses and services, that means that they have been dishing out money hand over fist, left, right, and center to all kinds of people who randomly gather. When you see some of those protests on TV and just suddenly, a few thousand people appear and they all have the same little placards that they're holding saying, just stop oil, or whatever the case might be. And you go like, wow, this seems really, really organized. Well, you bet it's organized. They might have received some of the $8.3 million from 350 that they were dishing out to those worthy causes that they support, which of course is very near and dear to all of us watching this. So remember, a couple of years ago, Extinction Rebellion, wasn't that fun, right? You had all these people doing all kinds of weird things, predominantly in the UK, right? So you had people dressed in cloaks and they looked like they were from a Halloween or a horror movie or something like that. And they were marching down the road, carrying placards, wearing cloaks in red or black or something, looking kind of evil, scary, because they wanted to tell us that the world was going to end. Have you ever wondered sort of what happened to Extinction Rebellion? Because they were everywhere. I mean, we saw them in the news all the time, and then suddenly they were no longer around. Well, we'll get back to that in just a second. What do they want to do as Extinction Rebellion? They want to tell the truth. They want to act now and decide together. Right at the bottom, it says we need change, that it is decided fairly and transparently. We need a citizens' assembly on climate and ecological justice, because obviously, in the absence of Extinction Rebellion, there is no climate and ecological justice. They are working for us. Everything they do is for us and to save the planet and to save humanity. So what happened? Extinction Rebellion, or XR, was created in the UK in mid-2019. You can be forgiven if you think this was 20 years ago. It actually was just 4 years ago. And where did it come from? Well, its origin was Rising Up, which was a network of individuals that included members of Earth First, which is a radical environmentalist organization. These are hyperlinks, by the way, so I kept my links to where I found the information in case somebody wants to cross-examine me afterwards and say, you are not sharing facts. Of course, I'm not sharing facts. I told you right at the beginning, this is just sarcasm. A radical environmentalist organization and the Occupy movement. Remember that? Occupy Wall Street from a few years ago, right? There were people camping in front of Wall Street and the stock exchange and doing all kinds of wonderful things to make us aware of the fact that we are destroying the planet. Who were the XR money men? Well, this one kind of shocked me a little, but not a lot. Not like just the oil, which I'll get to in a minute. UK billionaire Christopher Hone. I'd never heard of Christopher Hone before, so I don't know who that is. But man, I used to be a great fan of Radiohead. And now that I see they're doing so much good, funding organizations like Extinction Rebellion, I probably like them even more. So now Radiohead is no longer my second favorite after Metallica. It is now number 1, and Metallica has to move to number 2. According to the XR files, one of the over $1 million donations to the group's cause was made by a famous US immigrant and financier, George Soros. Oh, we just saw his name on the previous page as well, but that one was just a rumor, so this one's probably just a rumor as well. How about these guys? Climate Emergency Fund. Our grantees are bringing the climate crisis to its creators. End fossil fuels now. This is their website screenshot that I snagged. This one's just a little one. It's not nearly as big as 350 because their contributions and grants for the current year, which was the previous year, the 990 filing from 2021 was only 2.2 million. So it's like 10% in terms of size compared to 350. However, unlike 350, that received $23 million and spent only $10.8 million on salaries and program expenses for people, comparatively, this one is actually doing pretty good because the Climate Emergency Fund almost distributed all the cash that they have. Because if you look at all the grants and amounts that they paid out, there's not a huge delta here. In fact, the year before their previous last filing, so this I think is 2021 and this is 2020. I'd have to look to make sure, but let's just take that as gospel for now. In that current year, which was 2021, they had only shown a gain if you deduct the expenses from their revenue of $481,000. In the previous year, they actually lost $761,000. So they pretty much distribute everything that they receive, which is more common or more typical of nonprofit organizations. Money in, money out. Generally, you don't build a big pool and slush fund for yourself for other things. Now, this is the one I really want to talk to you about. And man, this stuff is just absolutely stunning. I was wondering to myself, where did Just Stop Oil come from, right? Because just a few years ago, it was Extinction Rebellion, and the other guys that I mentioned are kind of in the background. They're more sort of fiduciaries, or people who just funnel money to causes that they support, or people who support their cause that they fund in order to do whatever it is that they do. But Just Stop Oil, I mean, from throwing soup on paintings from medieval masters to gluing themselves to the road and things like that, they have made quite an impression, you know, and I must say, once again, it's very, very positive because everything that they do for us in order to save humanity and to save the planet. People versus oil, Just Stop Oil, march with us. I mean, this is a justifiable cause, and I'm sure you can appreciate it a lot. I thought I'll put this little cartoon in because there's always some people who are being sarcastic, not like me, right? Doctor, I'm afraid we're all going to die of climate change. And the doctor says, have you tried gluing your hand to the road yet? Previously, prior to Just Stop Oil, I had never seen this effective tactic, which is so brilliant, of gluing yourself to the street. I mean, what a wonderful thing to do in order to save the planet. I mean, that's the least we could all do. In fact, we should all rush out and glue ourselves to the street or a painting or something, right? Anyway, that's kind of what they do. Then I saw on their website that they are part of an international network, and that includes the United States. So immediately I thought, like, wait a minute, I could get the 990 for the United States chapter. Well, actually, I couldn't really, because this is a UK organization, and in the United States, they only have a small little chapter in Washington, D.C., which, as per its last filing that they filed, the 990 filing, was called Declare Emergency, and they only generated approximately $50,000 in revenue. So they were effectively almost irrelevant in the United States, but they were very relevant and certainly getting a lot of publicity in the UK as well. They should, because of all the good that they're doing, right? Declare emergency. Our amazing world will soon be inundated by migration. What does migration have to do with Just Stop Oil? Anyway, I don't know. I'm not smart enough. Social collapse. You will collapse socially if you just stop oil. Starvation. You will collapse and become prone to starvation if you just stop oil. So their cause is good, because if they just stop oil, they'll actually achieve all these things, right? Social collapse, starvation, disease, war, death of a magnitude never experienced before. You know, this is scary, scary stuff, right? So they are working in our best interest. But wait, it gets better, or significantly worse. So because it's not a US organization and I can't pull up the 990, I thought, well, let me go to the source here. And I think the source would be okay, because I went to the registrar of companies in England and Wales, and this is the organization that basically certifies the company as being a legitimately filed, properly organized company. And here, the first thing I found was a file copy that says the Certificate of Incorporation on Change of Name. Just very recently, in fact, on the 20th of December, 2022, so just about, 18, 19 months ago, Just Stop Oil changed its name to Sanag, which could also be Sanach Processing Limited. So I'm not exactly sure how to say this word, but I did look it up. And I'm going to tell you about it in just a second, because it gets worse or better, depending on which way you lean. Let's call it Sanach, okay? Just for the sake of forgiving my accent. Processing Limited. The company director, so this one company director, one, as in one person, and he's got a very unusual name, which makes it really, really easy to kind of Google him, because if his name was John Smith, I would have had, 200 million links or hits on Google or whatever. But because his name is Warsami Giuled, I'm not sure. Let's just call him Warsami, right? He is the company director. Recorded in the company's registered office, his country of residence is usually England. His country or state, usually resident in England. His nationality is British. So he has a strange British name, Warsami Giuled, but that's his name. And look at his date of birth here. And I'm going to ask you to just pay very, very special attention here at his date of birth. I'm assuming, because it says ... it doesn't want to show you what day it is, but this must be December of 1988, right? So, I mean, that's a fair guess. It's highly unlikely that it's the 12th day and they're hiding away the month. They're probably hiding away the day, month, year, because that's how they usually write the date in Europe and the UK. So he was born in December 1988, which means in 2014, he would have been about 25 years old. And now you might say, so what? Well, I'm going to show you what in just a second. He is the company secretary and director. So I feel like, I just got to make sure I have good information here. And by the way, my source is the Registrar of Companies for England and Wales. So I went one level deeper. I went to the government.uk Companies House and I searched for Sanach Processing Limited, or Sanag, if you wish, or Sanag, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure. Because I don't speak Somali. How do I know I don't speak Somali? Well, I'll tell you in just a second. The registered office address right here at the bottom of the screen says 11 Eaton, Stanmore, England. And the postal code for his address is on here. So this is the name of the company that used to be previously called Just Stop Oil, is now called Sanag or Sanag Processing Limited, and their address is Stanmore, England. Now, what's that got to do with anything, or why is this important? So the first thing I did was, because I don't know how to say Sanag or Sanag or Sanag or whatever, I looked it up. This is just on Google. In fact, I looked it up on Google Maps because I didn't want to go to Google Maps. I just Googled Sanag, and this place in Somalia came up. So now I know that this probably has some kind of a link, unless there's a different meaning to the word Sanag. It is actually a place in Somalia. And maybe that is where Mr. whatever his name is comes from. I'm not absolutely sure. So let's go a little deeper. The statement of capital. Well, if you start a company, you probably need to tell the registrar when you start a company of this nature, how much money you have or how much shares you are allocating, right? So what they've done here is they said, this is our statement of capital, which is also called a cap table for many, many people. This number here, in case you can't follow because there are too many zeros, is actually 10 billion shares in Great British pounds. And the total number of shares, as I said, is 10 billion. And the aggregate nominal value is 10 billion GBP, which is British pounds. So this company has no unpaid shares and is worth approximately $10 billion. Then this guy must be fabulously successful, but I've never heard of him. I don't know who he is. Of course, I Googled his name. His name is Warsame Giuled or Gulad, or however you say that. I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter because I cannot really find this person, right? So this little screenshot over here is his Twitter account, and it's up to date up to August 2017. He only had 28 followers, which is kind of weird for someone who's worth like $10 billion. And he says, deleting Twitter. Sorry, people. That was way before Elon Musk. So now we can't even blame Elon Musk for Warsami deleting Twitter. Anyway, there's a pretty picture of this handsome prince. And this screenshot over here is from LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, he wasn't very active either, which is really very, very strange for a millennial, or a younger person. They're usually very active on social media. And on LinkedIn, he only had 2 connections. He lives in London, England. So it might be the right guy, right? I mean, fair? Maybe. I don't know. Looks like it could be the same guy. I mean, most unusual name. And he's in London, England. That seems to be correct. Then I went to Facebook and I looked him up there. Well, it previously did exist. There's no pictures of him. There's no anything. You can't see these 23 friends. So I don't know. And then over here, right at the bottom, same guy, no videos, and the channel doesn't have any content. This is his YouTube channel. So in terms of sort of regular social media, which many people use, even if they just use one of them, I mean, like even for myself, I do have a LinkedIn profile and I am active on Twitter. So even though I don't like Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that, you can still find me on, YouTube, obviously, and LinkedIn and Twitter, for example, which is now X. But you can find me, right? This guy is almost like the Phantom, man. He just disappeared. He's gone. So then I found, because I was Googling his name, I found this website that I had never heard about called plantalk.co.uk. And there's this thread here on this forum. And I've never been to this website. I'm not active in it. I'm not a participant. I'm not registered. I'm nothing. I'm just snagging screenshots here for you from plantalk.co.uk. And there's this header for this forum that's called the Global Warming Fiasco, or how to tax the out of us. Well, I'm not allowed to use any expletives or anything like that, because otherwise I increase my risks of being deplatformed, demonetized, or canceled quite significantly. So I'll just read it the way it is. This forum says the global warming fiasco, or how to tax the out of us. Here's the actual thread, right? And then VA Druid said, and bombarded them with, well, I'm not allowed to say that word either. I'm not too sure, but I'll just try to stay really polite here and skip all these bad words, right? Here's the guy's name again, Warsami Giuled. And this is the same address. It must be the same person, right? Be interesting to know how, question. Other businesses support blah. Statement of capital on 2022, October 27, 10 billion pounds. A new incorporation and appointment, obviously planning some serious with 10 billion pounds to play with. What the actual, right? So who is this guy? What is going on here, right? But if you Google his name, which you are welcome to do, by the way, there is his name. His name is Warsami, or however you say that, and his last name is Giuled. So if you Google that, you will find all this information I'm sharing with you right now yourself. But wait, it gets even worse. Even better. My London is a news site, right? So when I Googled his name, this came up as well. Jailed Wellstone Knifeman's killing of ex-Somali Prime Minister, blah, 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 right? Look at the date down here at the bottom. July 2014. Now, let me go back just a few pages. When I introduced him to you, I said he would have been about 25 years old on July 2014, if it were the same guy, which I am not sure about because I don't have a crystal ball. And I'm obviously not so smart anyway, so I'm just reading stuff, right? Here is a report from July 2014 that said, as this man begins his 8-year jail term for stabbing his victim in the head, details have emerged as part of blah, blah, blah. Warsami Giuled, 25, of no fixed address, had a fight with a 23-year-old man last December last year, which ended in Giuled, or Gilad, whatever, stabbing the victim in the head outside Casino Amusements Arcade in High Street, Wellstone. This caused a 3-inch cut above his right ear. Warsami, formerly of Eaton Close, Stanmore, was sentenced on Friday in Harrow Crown Court to 8 years imprisonment. Work with me here, guys. 8 years from 2014 is 2022. So he was sentenced to prison 8 years ago for doing this thing, supposedly. Let's assume this is a news story that is correct. And remember, I'm not making the news. I'm just sharing the news, right? So what he did was, when he was about 25 years old, he was sentenced to jail for 8 years. It says so here. Harrow Crown Court to 8 years imprisonment for grievous bodily harm with intent, and concurrently to 1 year in jail for possession of a bladed article in a public place. So concurrently means you can skip like 1 year. So that was in 2014. 2014 plus 8 years would have been 2022. So this guy basically is released from prison in 2022, and a couple of months later, he forms a company called Sanach Processing, which used to be called Just Stop Oil. with founding capital, I'm not sure if there's any money at all. I mean, you could probably put in the filing papers, whatever you want, even if there's no money and it doesn't even exist. But you filed this 10 billion British pounds as starting capital, right? It must be the same guy, right? If I got something wrong, then you can tell me. But this is the backstory to Just Stop Oil. The company used to be called Just Stop Oil. Excuse me for flipping the screens here, but I just want to make sure you get this. The Registrar of Companies for England and Wales hereby certifies that under the Companies Act of 2006, Just Stop Oil Limited, the company incorporated as private limited by shares, having its registered offices in Wales and England, changed its name to Sanach Processing on December the 20th, 2022. His address, 11 Eaton Close, Stanmore, England. It's got to be the same guy, right? Formerly of Eaton Close, Stanmore, was sentenced to 8 years imprisonment, right? So what kind of a guy stabs someone else in the head, goes to jail for 8 years, gets released from prison, served his sentence, right? So he's free to go and starts a company with 10 billion British pounds. I'm not sure. On a lighter note, let's get off this topic. Here are the people who created Greta Thunberg, in case you're a fan, right? We don't have time. There she is with a little sign that says, we don't have time. They literally used her as their junior ambassador. And that is where Greta Thunberg came from and why we know her as who she is today. Now, this is all I've got for you. And this is my entire video. But it was so stunning when I started reading up on Just Stop Oil. I couldn't stop. And then I thought, like, I'll take a chance. Many of you know me as Mr. Oxy. Some of you call me Mr. Energy. And some of you just watch my videos because it's usually about energy investing. In this particular instance, I'm basically saying we must just stop oil and do whatever we can and work with Warsami in order to do so. Hey, man, I'm not sure. I don't even know what's going on here because this is just mind-boggling stuff. But anyway, there's Greta, just to leave you with a pretty picture and a lighter note to end the video. And then there is Greta in one of the most famous poses saying, to me, not to you, how dare you? And on that happy note, this is Rudy signing off, saying thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.